Platting Board will come to order. It is Wednesday, September 4th, and it is 6:33 p.m. May we have roll call, please?
Mr. Story?
He's excused tonight.
Mr. Abel?
He's excused tonight.
Mr. Fuller?
Here.
Mr. Young?
Present.
Mr. Cole? Mr. Cange? Mr. Edmondson?
Here.
Mr. Walker?
Here.
Ms. Enix? Thank you.
Thank you. We have a quorum, and we have a short board tonight. We have two members who may show up. So, where's the language? When there is a short 5-member board or commission and a postponement is offered to and agreed to by the petitioner, they will be moved to the next regular agenda. This should occur within 30 days, which does not require renoticing the case, meaning a new public hearing, notices, and advertising. If the petitioner is willing to postpone but unable to attend the next available meeting date within 30 days, the petitioner has a one-time only option to choose the next date certain he or she can attend at no extra fee. When a postponement is requested by the petitioner, there is a rescheduling fee, AMCR 21.20.007.a, and a new public hearing date shall be determined by the Planning Division. This will put their case in the next available cutoff date queue as if they were submitting their case for the first time. Is there any of the petitioners tonight that wish to have a postponement? I see none. Okay, we will proceed. Thank you. The first order of business, or the next order of business, is approval of the action summaries dated Wednesday, August 7th, 2013. May I have a positive motion to approve? Mr. Edmondson, and seconds by Mr. Fuller. So the motion is to approve the summary of action, August 7th, 2013. Is there any discussion? Is there any opposition to this motion? This motion passes. Thank you. The next item is, do we have minutes? We don't have any minutes to review. The next item is special orders of business, actually it's disclosures and then the informational items. Thank you. Do we have any disclosures tonight? I guess I'll be the one to make all the disclosures. Oh, thank you. Mr. Edmondson, thank you. Go ahead. Proceed.
In case S11948-2, first edition Girdwood Town Site, I'd just like to disclose that my firm, the Peterson Group, uses the petitioner's representative, the Boutte Company, and Tony Hoffman on numerous projects as a consultant. But in regards to this case, I have no involvement and no financial involvement in the case as well, and feel I can act impartially.
Thank you. May I have a positive motion directing Mr. Edmondson to participate tonight? Mr. Walker, and your motion is to direct?
I move to direct Mr. Edmondson to participate in the matter in which he made a disclosure.
And Mr. Fuller seconds. The matter in front of the board is the motion to direct Member Edmondson to participate. Is there any discussion? Mr. Walker, would you speak to your motion?
Based on Mr. Edmondson's disclosure that his interest is only having used the same vendor as the movement tonight, I don't find any financial interest or any thing that would vary how he might vote or resolve the issue, and think that he should participate.
Thank you. Is there any objections to Mr. Edmondson participating? Hearing and seeing none, the motion passes. Mr. Edmondson, you are directed to participate. Are there any other disclosures?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have one additional disclosure in case S12009-1, UMid Professional Park. Similarly, my firm, the Peterson Group, uses Dow engineers to do consultant work on many of our projects. Also, used to work for Dow many, many years ago, about 15 years or more ago. So just wanted to make that disclosure. I do not have an interest or any involvement in the case before us tonight, nor do I have any financial interest.
And Mr. Edmondson, can you remain impartial, in fact, in action on this case tonight?
Yeah, I apologize. Yes, I can. I feel like I can act impartially in this case.
Thank you. May I have a positive motion directing Mr. Edmondson to participate? Mr. Fuller, and second by Ms. Enix. Mr. Fuller, will you speak to your motion, please?
I move that Mr. Edmondson be directed to participate in S12009-1.
Thank you. And do you intend to support your motion?
Based on his disclosure, I intend to support. He has just a past attachment, but no interest or financial interest.
Thank you. So the motion on the floor is to direct Mr. Edmondson to participate in case S12009-1. Is there any additional discussion? Are there any objections? Hearing and seeing none, Mr. Edmondson, you're directed to participate in case S12009-1. Ms. Enix. Microphone.
I have a disclosure.
Proceed.
I have had business dealings in the past with the Boutte Company, and Tony Hoffman is a known person to me, but I have no financial interest in this case, and I feel like it can be a fair and impartial member tonight.
Thank you. May I have a positive motion directing Ms. Enix to participate? Mr. Walker, and seconded by Mr. Edmondson. Mr. Walker, will you speak to your motion?
I move that Ms. Enix participate in this matter because she doesn't have a substantial interest in it. There's no monetary interest in the matter or the outcome of it, and I believe she can act impartially.
Thank you. The motion on the floor is to direct Ms. Enix to participate in case S11948-2, first edition, Girdwood Town Site. Is there any additional comments? I am going to support the motion also. I find that she can remain impartial in fact. She stated that she can remain impartial in fact in action. She has no financial or personal interest in this matter before the board. Is there any objections to having Ms. Enix participate? Hearing and seeing none, the motion passes. Ms. Enix, you're directed to participate in case S11948-2. Are there any additional disclosures? Okay, my turn. In the case S11948-2, first edition, Girdwood Town Site, my firm has had business dealings with the petitioner on other projects in the past. My firm has ongoing business dealings on several common projects with the petitioner's representative. I have no financial or personal interest in the matters before the board tonight. I can remain impartial, in fact, in action as a member of this board without personal bias. My past involvement and personal interests will not prevent me from fairly evaluating the facts of this case. May I have a positive motion directing me to participate, please? Mr. Walker, and second by Ms. Enix. Mr. Walker, will you speak to your motion, please?
I'd direct Dan Young to participate in S11948-2. He doesn't have a financial interest in the outcome of the matter, and his prior dealings with the common vendors, again, is not wouldn't affect his ability to act impartially.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Or is there any objection to having me participate? Hearing and seeing none, the motion passes, and I'm directed to participate in case S11948-2. My next disclosure is case S12009-1, the UMed Professional Park, Track 2A-1 and Track 2B-1. My firm has had business dealings with the petitioner's representative on other matters. I was an employee of the petitioner's representative approximately 29 years ago. I have no financial or personal interest in the matters before the board tonight. I can remain impartial in fact, in action, and in fact and in action as a member of the board without personal bias. My past involvement and personal interests will not prevent me from fairly evaluating the facts of this case. May I have a positive motion directing me to participate? Mr. Walker, and a second by Mr. Edmondson. Mr. Walker, will you speak to your motion, please?
Yes. I move that you be directed to participate in matter S12009-1, the UMed Professional Park matter. I find that you don't have a financial interest, personal interest in the matter presently before the board, that you can remain impartial in fact and in action, and that your past involvement with this particular vendor won't prevent you from fairly evaluating the facts of this case.
Thank you. Is there any additional information or discussion? Is there any opposition? This motion carries, and I'm directed to participate. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is informational on the short plats of July 8th, July 29th, and August 5th, August 12th. I think there's several others in here. These are for informational purposes. Are there any comments on these? Hearing and seeing none, we will move on. Okay. Thank you. The next item is item D, consent agenda, and this is for a time extension of case S11899-2, the first 18-month time extension for the preliminary plat approved August 18th, 2012, Weiss subdivision. May I have a motion for a time extension, approval of time extension? This is part of the consent agenda. So Mr. Edmondson moves, and Mr. Fuller is going to second. Mr. Edmondson, will you speak to your motion, please?
I move to approve the consent agenda for case S11899-2, Weiss subdivision.
Thank you. The motion on the floor is to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Is there any opposition? Hearing and seeing none, the motion carries. The next item on the agenda is the public hearing. The procedure by which the public may speak to the Platting Board at its meeting is, after the staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, the chair will ask public testimony on the issue. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the Commission Rules and Procedures. Petitioners, including all of his or her representatives, have 10 minutes. Part of this time may be reserved for rebuttal. Representative of groups, like community councils, PTAs, etc., have 5 minutes, and individuals have 3 minutes. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the board. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the board. Any individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Platting Board takes. Appeal of this decision or any of the conditions governed by AMC 21.11.304. The decision of the board at the scheduled public hearing shall become final 7 calendar days after the date the decision is made on the record, unless a written request is submitted to the Planning Division prior to the expiration of the 7th day to prepare a written decision based upon the record made at the hearing, and the request is accompanied by a written notice of intent to appeal. Adoption of the written decision by the Planning Board becomes the final appealable decision. Within 20 days of the final appealable decision, an interested party must file with the municipal clerk either a written motion alleging new evidence or changed circumstances per 21.11.503, or an appeal of the board's final appealable decision per AMC 21.30. The first case before us tonight is case S11948-2, first edition, Girdwood Town Site, Alaska Subdivision, Municipality of Anchorage Heritage Land Bank. May we have staff's presentation, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This preliminary plat is a request for subdivision of 152 lots and 18 tracts of land into 5 tracts of land with a variance from AMC 2185-030, improvement requirements by improvement area, and vacation of rights of way to include Beaver Court, Diamond Circle, Alpine Court, Cooper Circle, Emerald Circle, Gold Circle, Kita Circle, Mineral Circle, Lupine Circle, North Juniper Circle, South Juniper Circle, Fern Circle, portions of Ivy Circle, Ivy Drive, Hemlock Circle, and all walkway, utility, and drainage easements located within the platted boundary. The property is owned by Heritage Land Bank. This plat is essentially a reversion to acreage where the petitioner is proposing to vacate all lot lines and easements within the subdivision. The underlying plat 66-76 was recorded as a paper plat with no public improvements made to the property at the time of platting. There are 3 privately owned lots within the subdivision that are excluded from this platting action. The petitioner has worked diligently with the planning staff to ensure that these 3 private lots continue to enjoy physical and legal access via public right-of-way. The petition site is zoned GOS, Girdwood Open Space District, GC5, New Town Site South Commercial District, and GCR1 Commercial Recreational District. Each tract within the proposed subdivision meets the minimum lot size and width required for each respective zoning district. The tracts were configured in such a way as to minimize split zoning. There is a small portion of the property that is split zoned, but planning staff doesn't believe that this is an issue that is going to affect the platting action. The Glacier Creek Iditarod Trail System, which was formerly located along Cottonwood Street, is being realigned where the existing plat appears to identify it. The non-motorized transportation coordinator is requesting that a 50-foot greenbelt trail easement be dedicated either side of the center line of the realigned trail. Future development should provide an access to the trail via a 10-foot walkway easement. The petitioner is requesting vacation of rights-of-way to include the previously stated rights-of-way. The vacation request has been reviewed and found to conform with the municipal vacation policy. The request for vacation is, like I said, a reversion to acreage in preparation for future responsible development. There are 3 privately owned lots within the subdivision. The petitioner has worked with the planning staff to ensure that the rights-of-way providing access to these 3 lots remain. All reviewing agencies have had no objection to vacation request, and sufficient legal and physical access to those 3 lots is provided via rights-of-way and easement. So these rights-of-ways and easements are access to municipal need. Petitioner is also requesting a variance from AMC 2185-030, improvement requirements by improvement area, to allow the petitioner to not improve any roads within this proposed subdivision. There are 4 standards associated or required to be met for the granting of a variance. I'll go through each standard separately. Standard number 1, staff finds this standard to be met. There are special circumstances that exist in the property that are unique. The property was paper platted in 1966 with no public improvements made at that time. The Heritage Land Bank's intent with this platting action is to create a blank slate, thus allowing the future comprehensive and logical development that would conform to the South Town Site Master Plan. Standard number 2, staff finds this standard to be met. The granting of this variance will not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to other property in the area. There are 3 privately owned lots that could be affected by this subdivision. However, the petitioner has worked with planning staff to ensure that the physical and legal access to these lots is publicly dedicated right-of-way. Standard number 3, staff finds this standard to be met. Granting of this requested variance will not have the effect of nullifying the intent and purpose of the subdivision regulations. Being a reversion to acreage, the proposed plat moves the subdivision in direction of conformity with the subdivision regulations, the underlying zoning district regulations, and the Girdwood Area Plan. Standard number 4, staff finds this standard to be met. Undue hardship would result for the petitioner from strict compliance with the subdivision regulations. The underlying plat provides an inefficient road maintenance and infrastructure layout and would foster development that is not in compliance with the comprehensive plan. Strict compliance would deter future responsible development of this property, which creates an undue hardship on the property owner. That being said, staff would like to recommend approval of the request to vacate the previously stated rights-of-way, walkways, utility, and drainage easements, and would also recommend approval of the variance from AMC 2185-030, and recommends approval of the plat for 18 months, subject to the conditions stated on pages 8 and 9 of your staff packet, with one change. If I could direct the board's attention to condition number 2, which states dedicating a 50-foot greenbelt trail easement either side of the center line of the realigned Iditarod Trail. I spoke with the non-motorized transportation coordinator this morning, and we are in agreement that the need to dedicate the greenbelt trail easement is there. However, the location and width of that easement has not yet been determined. So in an effort to work that out with the non-motorized transportation coordinator, staff is recommending that the condition number 2 be modified to state dedicating a greenbelt trail easement to preserve the historic Iditarod Trail, period. The location and width to be resolved with the non-motorized transportation coordinator, period. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you need him to read that again? Would you repeat the modification to item number 2? And when you do, would you mind going slow so we have time to write it down, please?
Certainly. Quote, dedicating a greenbelt trail easement to preserve the historic Iditarod Trail, period. The location and width is to be resolved with the non-motorized transportation coordinator, period.
One more time, please.
Dedicating a greenbelt trail easement to preserve the historic Iditarod Trail, period. The location and width is to be resolved with the non-motorized transportation coordinator, period.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff? Mr. Edmondson.
Staff, through the chair, I just have a question for you on there's a comment from right-of-way. It says the access easements adjacent to the privately owned parcels are insufficient to allow public turnaround at those locations and needs hammerhead or cul-de-sac type areas. Has that been sufficiently addressed in the plat before us?
Through the chair, yes, I believe so. Private development did not have an issue with that. The fire department did not comment on that. So I believe that the turnaround is sufficient on the plat. I'm not exactly sure where that comment came from, but I believe it has been appropriately resolved with this platting action.
Are there any additional questions from staff? Hearing and seeing none, we will open the public hearing. Will the petitioner's representative please step forward, state your name, spell your last name for us, please, and let us know if you would like to reserve time for rebuttal and how much time.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Tony Hoffman. I work for the Boutte Company, and we're representing the petitioner, Heritage Land Bank, in this case before you. I'd like to reserve whatever time I have left over. I'm not going to have much to say. We agree with the staff's conditions, and as well as the revision to item 2C2. However, there's one thing I'd like to bring up and put it on public record. Resolving easements with the non-motorized trail coordinator it can be difficult. And we have not yet seen an appropriate map that really spells out the location where they want this trail. The historic Iditarod Trail plan that I just was made aware of and saw basically shows it along the east side of the property along the creek, which is fine. But just we want to put on record that resolving these things later with the trail coordinator, it can be difficult. And we would have rather had it pinned down and tied to a trail plan or some other document. And there is none, or there wasn't one in any of the comments from the trail coordinator. So this resolve is going to be difficult, but we will make it work. It's a good compromise at this time, at this late time. Other than that, we agree with the rest of the conditions, and the staff's done a good job on it.
Thank you. You have 8 minutes and 36 seconds for rebuttal. Are there questions of the petitioner? Mr. Fuller, Mr. Walker, then Mr. Fuller.
Where would you like to see the trail?
On the east boundary along the stream, basically in the 25-foot setback that will run along the creek on the Glacier Creek.
And what would be the description of that?
The description would be trail easement for trail purposes.
And the width of it?
25 feet. The trail plan actually calls for an 8-foot trail, I believe. But it's a document I hadn't seen. It's a 1997 guiding historical trail plan, which now they're beginning to implement. It was actually in the news this week. If you saw it, Sean Lyons had a write-up about the piece of trail he went up on, I think, back behind the Chugach. So it's becoming more and more to the forefront of our, of what we're thinking and planning. But a 25-foot creek or a trail easement would be adequate. On a side note, the actual constructability of it in that area, because of the wetlands, because of the floodplain, And because of the terrain and the thick brush along there, it's going to be really difficult to build any trail anywhere in there. But we're fine with putting an easement on it in that area. We don't want it coming along the road right down the middle. That would be an impractical. So that's why you understand my objection. I mean, the trail coordinator may come back and say, well, we know that's not buildable along Glacier Creek, so let's just put a 25-foot easement along the road. Well, we don't want that. But I wanted to actually revise our language on this revision to state to be in the trail location, be in compliance with the historic Iditarod Trail plan, but however, I just saw that plan, so I don't think that's practical. I think resolve with is as good as we can do right now.
Thank you.
Mr. Fuller.
Yeah, he covered the same subject. Thanks.
Are there any other questions of the petitioner? I do have one, Mr. Hoffman. It's regarding the trail as well. If this trail is built in the area that is ideal for you along the creek, would there still be a 50-foot buffer requirement, or?
No, the 50-foot on each side buffer requirement that was notated in here, and I think planning is ridiculous. That's a 100-foot corridor for a trail is so the 25-foot is what the plan calls for 8 foot. I think 25-foot is more than adequate to build a trail, to add amenities to the trail so people can get to it and utilize it and have the placards and have all the things. So a 50-foot buffer on each side of the trail, it wouldn't be practical unless you were well into the property. Then you'd buffer it on each side, but that just...
And if this was near the creek, then the creek would act as a buffer, so you would have...
That is true.
You
that
would
is
have
correct.
an ample buffer on one side.
That is correct. There's a stream easement that runs along it. Along these streams, there's actually a 200-foot setback on Glacier Creek that comes with the patent. And I think it's on the drawing, but it's the uses of it. I would think that a historical trail is actually an allowed use in the state setback. So, nonetheless, the plan does indicate that, and the maps in the historic plan, as well as the 2009 Girdwood Trail plan I just saw, actually show it along the west side of Glacier Creek.
Thank you.
Along the creek.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions of the petitioner? Thank you.
Thank you.
You still have 8. Oh,
Nope.
Thank you. Mr. Edmondson does have a question.
Through the chair, Mr. Hoffman, I just want to clarify, you may have said this already, but I want to clarify. Are you okay with the approximate location shown on the plat that we have here?
A trail location on the plat.
Well, it says approximate.
Yeah, where is that? That was another question. I don't remember putting a trail on the plat. So there really isn't one, I don't believe. Centerline Trail. And I think that what that comment was referring to was an existing plat. And I never did, I saw that note as well, and
Well, it's on the plat.
it's on the plat. Okay,
You
so,
guys submitted. So
yes.
I'm just,
so that's where we want it.
in an effort to clarify this, and
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand if you're okay with
Yeah,
where
That would be-
the
that would be okay.
location is
Yeah.
indicated on your plat.
yeah. But yeah,
Do you want to look at it?
no.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any additional questions of the petitioner or the petitioner's representative? Thank you. You have 8 minutes and 36
Thank you.
seconds for rebuttal. Is there anyone from the public wishing to testify on this matter? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none. Mr. Hoffman, would you like to use any of your rebuttal time? No. Are there any additional questions of the petitioner? Staff? Yeah. Mr. Walker has a question for staff.
Could you speak a little bit more about the purpose of the 50-foot easement and why it's needed on either side of the midline of the trail?
Through the chair, Mr. Walker, this is a comment that came from the non-motorized transportation coordinator, and as Mr. Hoffman stated, the 100-foot easement, essentially a 100-foot easement, does appear to be a bit excessive. I had a conversation with the non-motorized transportation coordinator this morning. I feel that she was somewhat in agreement with me on that. She said she'd get back to me on what she felt was a more appropriate width, hence the revised condition with regard to the width and location. I think that the information we have available to us does not definitively spell out where the trail should be, and so I think that the location and the width are things that we need to work on that really can't be ironed out, so to speak, here tonight.
Is the purpose of the 100-foot wide area allowing the trail to meander back and forth? So unlike a sidewalk that you just cut straight through along the edge of a parcel, it's providing for that meandering?
Well, with the trail easement, we could dedicate a 25-foot trail easement that meanders or follows the course of the actual constructed trail. So I don't think that a 100-foot trail easement is really necessary. What the exact width should be, I'm not sure that I'm the appropriate person to determine that. I think that's something to be worked out with the non-motorized transportation coordinator, which is why I'm asking the petitioner tonight to work with that person and come up with a better location and width for that easement.
Now, on the plat that we're looking at, it shows that the trail actually only meanders onto the plat in a couple of areas, and that it spends a substantial amount of its space actually off the plat.
Through the chair, Mr. Walker, this is correct. It touches the property in a couple of different areas, but is primarily located outside the platted boundary of the property.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for staff? Mr. Fuller.
Through the chair, I've been on the Diderot Trail up north by Willow, and it was no more than a four-wheel drive, a 4x4 trailer. I suspect down at Girdwood with all the alders, it probably fallen into the creek bed, and it only moved out as the creek bed moved out. So I don't really see where more than 25 feet would be necessary. And that should be on the far east edge, if anything. So that's my observation. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Hoffman, would you like to use any of your rebuttal time?
Yeah, I did have one comment about that line that we put on the map that did come from a planning document. And from a constructability standpoint, it probably wouldn't have the jigs and jogs that you see on there. It would be a much straighter line. And because of the potential impacts to Glacier Creek, which is, even though it's a raging Glacier Creek, it's a sensitive creek. It's a sensitive area because of the Class A wetland. So it's going to be a real 25 foot would be about as wide as you would want, because constructing it is going to have to follow some very tight guidelines. And that's where the source of that is from a planning document that we digitized. So,
Mr. Fuller.
Through the chair, are they requiring you to build the trail?
No.
Okay, because I don't doubt they'd ever spend any money to
that,
build the trail.
as development happens later, that may actually become a condition of it, but I see it more as coming from a trail committee later in some sort of a fund.
In the Mr. Hoffman, there was a comment on page 44 suggesting that this is going to be owned by the Chugach National Forest, and if they're the owners, are they going to be the ones who are responsible for constructing it probably?
I would imagine so, yeah. I can see any number of different funding options for it.
And I am sympathetic to some of the challenges of having a nebulous condition on your plat and having to deal with staff who sometimes are difficult to come to consensus with. Could you tell us precisely where, or not precisely, but pretty close, that where you would put the trail and let us consider if we would accept that?
Well, the general location shown on here is actually fine because it has zero impact on the constructible areas of the property. The reality of it is pinning it down now before there's a funding option and a true route analysis and study done is going to be difficult. What I will make sure doesn't happen is that a blanket easement doesn't come around and get put on the property. So when there's a title report or construction done later, there's a blanket easement which will encumber it only worse. So it's going to be a matter of pinning it down with the trail coordinator, and I can actually see site visits with her, although I'm going to try to avoid that. I think we'll be able to pin it down on the aerial and the contouring better.
So how could we as a board address this issue tonight?
I appreciate you wanting to help me become more specific with our comment, but there's really not much of a better option right now of just working with the trail coordinator. The board could step in and minimize it to a 25-foot easement. Now that would be helpful, because that would pin it down to 25 foot. And the reality is additional language saying the general intent of the location to be compliant with the map, but that's difficult for you to do too. I don't want you to say it has to follow the route on the map, because but the scale on this map is 1 to 250, so it's a big wide area, and there's the trail location is shown in wetlands, it's shown in and out of stream setback, so I'm not concerned about it affecting the constructible areas on the property. On the east side, there's really, whoever develops this is going to have a challenge as it is. So I don't mind the trail location where we show it now, but a 25-foot easement I think would be fair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the petitioner? Thank you.
Thank you.
The public hearing portion of this case is over, and the matter now rests with the board. May we have a positive motion, Mr. Walker?
As to case number S119482, I move that we approve the request to vacate Beaver Court, Diamond Circle, Alpine Court, Cooper Circle, Emerald Circle, Gold Circle, Kita Circle, Mineral Circle, Lupine Circle, North Juniper Circle, South Juniper Circle, Fern Circle, portions of Ivy Circle, Ivy Drive, Hemlock Circle, and all the walkways, utilities, and drainage easements.
Thank you. And Mr. Edmondson seconds the motion. Mr. Walker, will you speak to your motion, please?
Yes, thank you. In considering the vacating of the plat, I'm cognizant that we're supposed to presume the property has value, and it's that the burden of proof is on the movement to show that there is no value in the plat as it exists. To that effect, I would guess that 50 years of attempted marketing of this property it's a pretty good example that the property as originally platted on the paper plat it hasn't proven to be valuable, and it's reasonable that we allow them to start with a fresh slate and try and make this a useful property.
Thank you. Is there any additional discussion? Mr. Edmondson.
Mr. Chair, I'd just also like to find that the vacation requests have been reviewed and found to conform to the municipal vacation policy and ordinance. And also I'd like to add that none of the reviewing agencies had any objection to the vacation requests, and there appears to be sufficient legal and physical access to all the lots, and that the rights of way and easements appear to be in excess to municipal needs.
Thank you. Is there any additional discussion? Is there any opposition to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion passes. May I have another motion for approval of the variances? Mr. Walker, will you state your motion?
As the case S11948-2, I move that we approve the request for variance from AMC 2185-030, the improvement requirements by an improvement area.
Thank you. Mr. Edmondson seconds, and the motion is for approval of the request for variance from AMC 21.85.030 improvement requirements by improvement area. Mr. Walker, will you speak to your motion, please?
Yes, thank you. I would like to adopt the findings of staff that are found on page 7 in the variance request items. This specific property has unique conditions. It was a paper-platted property back in 1966, and all of the improvements that were planned have been made in 1966 have never borne fruit. And so removing them is varying from it to continue to serve the existing 3 lots the way they've been served over the last 50 years seems reasonable. The granting the specific variance won't be detrimental to the public because we only have three affected lots in the property, and that's the way they've been served over the last 50 years, continuing to be done that way until future development is made seems reasonable. It's not going to have the effect of nullifying the intent or purpose of the subdivision or comprehensive plan. Indeed, we think that vacating this and allowing the variance for this time will help in developing the property in the future. And it would cause an undue hardship to require a complete upgrade to current standards for building just to serve these 3 lots before the property could be fully developed into a more economical uses. Accordingly, I would move that we approve the request for variance.
Thank you. Are there any additional comments or findings? I, too, am going to support this motion, and I concur with the findings that are on page 7 of our staff packet. Any objections to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion carries. Thank you. And may I have a motion for the approval of the plat for 18 months with conditions, please? Mr. Walker.
As to case number S11948-2, I move that we approve the plat for 18 months, subject to the conditions 1 through 4 stated on page 8 in our packet, with the following modification to item number 2. That the plat require a dedication of a greenbelt trail easement to preserve the historic Iditarod Trail, the location of which to be resolved with the non-motorized transportation coordinator.
Thank you. And is that a 25-foot? You didn't put a dimension on that.
That's correct. I have not put a mention on the actual width. As I understood it, staff struck the 50-foot as written here and asked it to be modified. The modification, as I've offered, is the one that was offered by staff and was accepted by the movement here. And while we did have considerable discussion about whether it should be 25 or 50 and whether it should be on either side of the center line, I think that to the extent that it's kept within the non-buildable section of the property, that that could be resolved later. The movement seemed to be willing to wait and try and resolve things with non-motorized transportation, and so I didn't feel that we would need to offer that specificity. And,
Thank you. The motion on the floor is to approve the plat for 18 months, subject to the conditions 1 through 4 on page 8, and modified as earlier, as described by Mr. Walker, dedicating a greenbelt trail easement to preserve the historic Iditarod Trail. Is there any discussion, any additional discussion? Mr. Edmondson.
Yeah, I just would like to add, I can sympathize with some of the petitioner's comments in regards to this particular situation with the trail location. This can be really difficult to deal with, particularly if it's not identified, and it just seems to be a lot here to be resolved in this particular item. So the location, the width, whether it's actually buildable in the location that's identified as approximate on the current plat is unknown. So anyway, I wanted to state that I hope that we're not making this more difficult to resolve by not providing some specifics here. But on the other hand, I'm not sure how we could provide more specifics based on the information that we have. So at this point, I think I intend to support the amendment on the table, but just wanted to make those comments.
Thank you. Are there any additional comments? Are there additional findings? Are there any objections to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion passes. Any individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Platting Board takes. Appeal of this decision or any of the conditions is governed by AMC 21.11.304. The decision of the Board at the scheduled public hearing shall become final 7 calendar days after the date the decision is made on the record, unless a written request is submitted to the Planning Division prior to expiration of the 7th day to prepare a written decision based upon The record made at the hearing and the request is accompanied by a written notice of intent to appeal. Adoption of the written decision by the Platting Board becomes the final appealable decision. Within 20 days of the final appealable decision, an interested party must file with the municipal clerk either a written motion alleging new evidence or changed circumstances per AMC 21.11.503 or an appeal of the board's final appealable decisions per AMC 21.30. The next item on the agenda is case number S12009-1, UMed Professional Park Subdivision, Alaska Mental Health Trust Authority. May we have staff's presentation, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This preliminary plat is a request for subdivision of 2 tracts of land into 2 different tracts of land with vacation of an 8-foot wide visual enhancement landscape easement located along the south boundary of existing tracts 2A and 2B. The plat is being done to facilitate the dedication of right-of-way to the municipality of Anchorage as part of the 40th Avenue Extension and Upgrade Project. With the exception of the south property lines, the boundaries of existing tracts 2A and 2B will not change. The vacation of the 8-foot wide landscape easement is being requested as a majority of it falls within the newly dedicated right-of-way. The petition site is zoned B3SL, General Business District with special limitations. The special limitations in the subject property revolve around landscaping, building setback and height standards, site design standards, building and site design guidelines, and prohibited uses. A copy of the special limitations is found in your staff packet. With the exception of the landscaping that is part of the, is within the actual right-of-way dedication, the property appears to conform to all the special limitations required by AO 2003-142. AWW is requesting that the petitioner resolve the relocation of the sanitary sewer easement dedicated by Plat 2004-149 to ensure that the existing sewer main is protected by easement. The sewer main is in a different location that is not within the sewer easement, and AWU is requesting that the petitioner relocate the existing easement to be located where the sewer main is actually located. NSTAR is requesting a 15-foot natural gas easement to protect the existing natural gas main located on the subject parcels. Same situation. With this plat, the petitioner is requesting to vacate the 8-foot wide visual enhancement landscape easement. The vacation request has been reviewed and found to conform to the municipal vacation policy. The 8-foot wide visual enhancement landscape easement will lie almost entirely within the dedicated right-of-way and appears to be access to municipal need. Reviewing agencies have had no comment and expressed no objection to the vacation request, and staff recommends approval of the request to vacate that 8-foot wide visual enhancement landscape easement. With that being said, staff is recommending approval of the vacation of the 8-foot wide visual enhancement landscape easement and approval of the plat for 18 months, subject to conditions 1 through 4 located on pages 5 and 6 of your staff packet. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff? The public hearing portion of this meeting is open. Will the petitioner's representative please step forward, state your name, spell your last name for us, please, and let us know if you'd like to reserve any specific amount of time for rebuttal.
Hello, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Tanya Hickok, Hickok, and I'm with Dowell HKM, and tonight we're representing the Alaska Mental Health Land Trust Authority. We have reviewed the case packet as written by Mr. Whitfield and find no objections to the conditions as written on pages 5 and 6, and so I'd be happy to answer any questions that you had.
Thank you. You have 9 minutes and 35 seconds for rebuttal. There are questions of the petitioner's representative. I don't see any. Thank you. Is there anyone from the public wishing to testify? Anyone at all? Please raise your hand or step forward. Hearing and seeing none, you now have time for rebuttal. Do you wish to use your rebuttal time? Petitioner's representative is shaking her head in a negative fashion. Are there any questions of the petitioner's representative before we close the public hearing? Any questions of staff before we close the public hearing? Public hearing is closed. The matter now rests with the board. May I have a positive motion, please? Okay. Sure. No, you missed your opportunity. Mr. Edmondson is going to make the motion.
Yes, Mr. Chair, in case S12009-1, UMed Professional Park Track 2A-1 and Track 2B-1, I move for the approval of the request to vacate an 8-foot wide visual enhancement landscape easement located along the south boundary of existing tracks 2A and 2B.
Thank you. And Ms. Enix seconds that. The motion on the floor is to approve the request to vacate an 8-foot wide visual enhancement landscape easement located along the south boundary of existing tracks 2A and 2B. Mr. Edmondson, will you speak to this motion, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I plan to support my motion. I find that the vacation request has been reviewed and found to conform to municipal vacation policy and ordinance, and that the 8-foot wide visual enhancement easement will lie almost entirely within the dedicated right-of-way and appears to be in excess to municipal need. I'd also like to state that the reviewing agencies have had no comment or expressed no objection to the vacation request.
Thank you. Are there any additional findings? Any additional comments? Is there any objection to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion carries. Thank you. May I have another motion for the approval of the plat for 18 months with conditions, please? Mr. Edmondson, will you state your motion, please?
Mr. Chair, in case S-12009-1, UMed Professional Park Tracks 2A-1 and Track 2B-1, I move for the approval of the plat for 18 months, subject to conditions 1 through 4, as outlined on our staff packet on pages 5 and 6.
Thank you. And Mr. Fuller seconds the motion, and the motion is to approve the plat for 18 months, subject to conditions 1 through 4 on pages 5 and 6. Mr. Edmondson, would you speak to this motion, please?
Yes, I just obviously plan to support my motion. I find that the conditions outlined for approval are based on reviewing agencies, and that the petitioner has no objection to any of those conditions.
Thank you. Are there any discussion or findings from the board? Any questions? Is there any opposition to this motion? Hearing and seeing none, the motion passes. Any individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Platting Board takes. Appeal of this decision or any of the conditions is governed by AMC 21.11.304. The decision of the board at the scheduled public hearing shall become final 7 calendar days after the date the decision is made on the record, unless a written request is submitted to the planning department prior to the expiration of the 7th day to prepare a written decision based upon the record made at the hearing, and the request is accompanied by a written notice of intent to appeal. Adoption of the written decision by the Platting Board becomes the final appealable decision. Within 20 days of the final appealable decision, an interested party must file with the municipal clerk either a written motion alleging new evidence or changed circumstances per AMC 21.11.503, or an appeal of the board's final appealable decision per AMC 21.30. Are there any appearances for any appearance requests tonight? No. Is there any others persons to be heard? No. Are there any reports? No. I know that answer. Are there any reports from the chair, the secretary, or the committee? We don't have any committees. The secretary is saying no. The chair says no. Are there any board member comments tonight? Everybody has no comment. Is there a motion to adjourn? Mr. Walker, and second by Ms. Enix. Is there any opposition? We are adjourned, and the time is 7:39. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.